Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good Friday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider. It is the 16th of December, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. You can do that easily by going to 800-472-0391 or find us on weather.gov/Alaska. But I'll give you a little word of caution about that tonight. We are troubleshooting some significant internet issues right now that are keeping the front map that you see when you get there from updating. So it might look kind of old and it won't match the current weather situation, which initially sounds pretty bad. But if you click on that, if you just click on the map and you get to your weather information that way, just that next click will save the day and you'll get the updated weather forecast that you're looking for. So ignore the front map right now. That's not working so well. Unfortunately, our TV maps are going to be hit by that as well. So if you look for the weather maps the last couple nights and you haven't been able to find them, they're not going to update for a while tonight as well. We know we're working on it as fast as we can. The sea ice maps are also not going to update. So keep your eye out for that. And as soon as those things are able to be updated, we will certainly do that because we know that you're looking for that information. nws.ar.tvweather@noaa.gov is a way to reach us on email, and we'll get those. So go ahead and let us know what's going on. Here's a look at the hazardous weather information. Again, your weather maps on the web page right now are not going to look like this. Around the Misty Fjords, you are under a winter storm watch. From Saturday and into Sunday, you may see up to 2 feet of snow in Hyder. 2 feet, Saturday to Sunday. So get prepared and get the shovels out, the snow blowers and the scoops and all of it. You're going to need it there in Hyder. Up to 2 feet of snow again from about Saturday afternoon into Sunday, and it will pick up during the day on Saturday. A look to the north and west into the Yukon Valley and into the Selawik region, as well as areas inside of Kotzebue Sound. We're expecting about 2 to 4 inches of snow from now until early tomorrow morning. A winter weather advisory is posted for all of these areas shaded in yellow. May see about 2 to 4 inches around the Selawik Valley area, but as you get into the lower and middle Yukon region, there may be some places that see as much as 8 inches of snow. That'll continue until through tonight and into very early tomorrow morning. So visibility will be a problem. And if you're moving through areas that have a lot of wind, that visibility could drop below 1/2 mile. So just be careful and have a plan. Let people know you're coming and let them know when you get there if you're called back home. If you're traveling out there on the trail again, conditions might be a little bit harder to get around for at least a little while tonight and into tomorrow. So be prepared for that. Out across the central Aleutians, you probably know what's coming your way. It is one storm as we get into tomorrow into about midday Sunday that is really going to start to rattle the roof a little bit. This weather pattern is going to start with strong and gusty winds from the south and east, and those will continue to come up through tonight and into tomorrow, the first part of the day. Some of those could come up to about 75 miles per hour for gusts from the southeast, but once the winds shift around to the west, as low pressure moves into the southern Bering, those gusts could come up to 90 miles per hour. So a high wind watch is posted for you. So stay tuned to your weather radio and your weather information source there as conditions may worsen. And if they do, and it looks a little bit more like a sure thing, we'll call that a high wind warning, of course. So gusts at their peak probably Saturday afternoon. Looking at westerlies there up to about 90 miles per hour, and some of those gusts could be even stronger if the position changes just a little bit. So keep watching the weather and we'll let you know what we see. Here's a look at one storm. This is not the storm that's going to make all the wind, but there is certainly another very large-scale low-pressure system out across the central and northern Bering Sea. It is pushing a wave of weather into the interior. This is the region that we're seeing snow falling across the lower and middle Yukon right there. And moisture is moving out over the Gulf. That is headed toward the Hyder region as that reaches your area. By tomorrow afternoon, it will start to snow, and snow it will, perhaps up to 2 feet apparently. The strong southerly winds continue to push moisture and warmth northward. The ice has been chewed up all the way across the southwestern coast and into Bristol Bay. When we take a look at that map a little bit later on, you'll notice some significant changes just over the last several days. I certainly did. And you'll notice that westerly flow is going to be very brief because right on the corner of your screen here is that next storm that's moving in. That's the one, if you've been watching the weather maps for a couple days, that's driving to about 940 millibars or so and headed for the central Aleutians. So a powerful weather maker there. Yet another one in the long series of pretty active storms that have been moving from west to east. Here's a look at the weather map now. We've got a trough of low pressure across the north and eastern Gulf, some pockets of rain across southeast, a little bit of snow in the northern parts of southeast around Haines and Skagway. Cold front's working across the western Gulf, trying to squeeze out some more moisture as it moves eastward there. Pockets of rain across the central and eastern Aleutians, and low pressure is at 954 millibars, so it has enough wind and enough strength to draw in some southerly warm air up the western coast. It is raining, or was, around Savunga while it was snowing in Valdez. Seems a little backward, but okay, we'll take that. Raining in Savunga. It could be snow again later tonight with low pressure at 960 millibars and filling in. But already there's room for another wave of low pressure across the western chain at 959. You can see a ridge of high pressure trying to sneak in between here to settle things down briefly, with showers expected across the central and eastern chain, the western and northern Gulf, and a little bit of snow across the northern and central sections of southeast. There was a report of some freezing rain, or pardon me, it was sleet in Juneau. There was a report of some sleet in Juneau earlier today, so a sign that there's still some warmer air kind of nestled in the nooks and crannies of southeast, especially around the Juneau area. And as that warm and wet air came in, it rained, but at the very last minute, froze before hitting the ground. That's what sleet is. It's basically a frozen raindrop, but it's not hail. Hail goes up and freezes, sleet falls down and freezes. Now, out across the western part of Alaska and Norton Sound, you see some light snow there. That is that 2 to 4 inches there, and maybe as much as 8 in some cases. As we look into Saturday, here is the big weather maker. They're around 940 millibars and just crossing the central Aleutians, around Adak. And that is going to switch your winds around from the south and east again, strong and gusty, up to about 75 miles per hour initially for the central chain. And then once that passes later on in the afternoon and evening, those winds are going to come hard around to the west and start blowing in from west to east, and gusts up to 90 miles per hour are possible there. So good time to make sure things are anchored and moored tightly, and do everything you can there to make sure everything's locked down. Across southeast, periods of rain and snow, and of course we've talked about Hyder, up to 2 feet of snow possible there starting on Saturday and going well into Sunday. Snow showers will be found across south central. Right now it does not look like a significant snowfall for most areas there, as that will be passing through, but certainly possible that you will see snow. And out across the eastern parts of Norton Sound all the way down to the southwest coast, snow showers will continue, a better chance for accumulating snow inland. And with that strong and gusty southerly flow working through the Bering Strait, it looks like it's cold enough for snow there, but local conditions may be slightly warmer, and you might see some mixed precipitation. That'll become more showery and more windy as we get into Sunday for many more parts of the interior, in fact. So would not be surprised if you see poor visibility from time to time as snow showers and wind-blown snow picks up in your area there. It looks like a generally dry Sunday afternoon for the north slope, and several waves of low pressure working across the northern sections there from east to west. Behind that, though, low pressure is filling into 953 millibars. But you can see several other pieces of that have formed around south central, across southwest, and still lingering across the central Aleutians. This is not going to be a kind of a once and done thing. It's going to linger throughout the day. So that high wind watch right now goes at least until noon on Sunday for the central chain. This is going to be a prolonged wind event for you. Across southeast, colder air is trying to sneak in, and once that happens, that will probably shut down some of the snow being made in Hyder, but at elevation there would be the concern, and we'll see how much snow continues as we get into the afternoon on Sunday. But warmer air is certainly possible to move into some parts of the region. And you can see rain pouring into the north and eastern Gulf Coast there, with low pressure sitting just on the southern tip of the Kenai at 961 millibars. The areas around Fairbanks and Tanana also looking at the possibility of accumulating snow. Now, here's temperatures today. Teens and 20s for many locations across southeast. The cold remains, but the warm air is trying to sneak in. It certainly is aloft if you're getting sleet in Juneau, so there is warm air moving around, but that cold air is certainly nestled in the nooks and crannies of southeast tonight. 32 around Yakutat, 34 in Cordova, 20s for Anchorage after several days in the single digits and teens, 42 around Homer, 32 in Seward. Up around Talkeetna today, 27 Glen Allen and Gulkana, about 4 below, 7 below. In Fairbanks today, Healy was a milder 30 degrees. 2 below in Eagle. It was 6 below in Fort Yukon, -8 in Arctic Village, with single digits and even teens across the North Slope. It was 18 degrees today in Barrow, and Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse around 10. Single digits there for Point Lay, as well as Wainwright at 4, 25 for Kivalina, 20 in Kotzebue, and 30 degrees in Nome this afternoon. Unalakleet was 32, 21 around Galena, 27 for Grayling, and out toward Russian Mission, 18 in McGrath and 36 in Bethel. Southwestern temperatures in Bristol Bay, 30s, even 40s around King Salmon. You can see the milder weather there for the Alaska Peninsula, as well as 30s and 40s for Kodiak Island, 38 in St. Paul, and mid-30s for Adak and Atka, again under that high wind watch. Overnight low temperatures will stay mild across the southwest coast and around St. Lawrence Island, 33 there, 35 for St. Paul, mid-30s for most of the chain, the Alaska Peninsula, southwest in the upper 20s to about 30. The central interior and Tanana Valley, low single digits, about 4 in Fairbanks, 7 below for Fort Yukon. Single digits to low teens for the Chukchi Seacoast, Beaufort Seacoast a little bit colder around Kaktovik. 20s and 30s for southeast and south central in the upper 20s to low 30s, including Kodiak at 34 and a high of 38 tomorrow there. The west coast back in the 20s and 30s for you, 33 in Nome, 13 in Barrow. It'll be 17 in Fairbanks tomorrow, lower 30s for many in south central, 38 in Kodiak, and upper 30s to low 40s for a large part of southeast. The central chain around 40 degrees, and again very windy throughout the day. IFR conditions across the west coast are expected around the outer sections of Norton Sound and into the Bering Strait region, St. Lawrence Island, and around the Chugach, and eastward into some of the Boundary Range, and then across some of the higher terrain across southeast. MVFR conditions hit and miss, but really focused on the southwest and northern Gulf as well as southeast in the morning. Some improvements there across the interior tomorrow, but look for IFR setting in across more of the lower terrain for the afternoon in the west, and wrapping around low pressure across the southern Bering and the central chain. IFR conditions linger across the higher terrain, including places like Juneau, as we get into the afternoon tomorrow. Here's your pass conditions. Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass we expect to linger at MVFR throughout the day. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass probably socked in at IFR throughout the day. Rainy Pass also looks to be IFR. Windy Pass will be IFR throughout the day. Isabel Pass leaning over that way, starting at MVFR, so if you can handle that, get going. Portage Pass, MVFR, maybe IFR by the afternoon. And Tanita Pass likely starting at IFR with some improvements possible during the day. Portage Pass, IFR conditions probably to start the day. MVFR by the afternoon. And Chilkoot and White Pass likely IFR in the region, but might start out at MVFR, then transitioning over toward IFR again as the day goes on. Now, freezing levels indicate that most of the interior is well below freezing there, with the elevated warmth starting to nudge in on southeast. Obviously, again, if you're getting sleet, that is certainly the case. By tomorrow, we expect that surface, or the warmer air aloft, to be just south of the Aleutians, and that'll probably get a nudge southward once again as we get into the following days following this next wave of weather. Icing potential has below about 2,000 feet across the North Slope. Once you get south of the Brooks Range, that'll be a little bit higher and thicker amounts of moisture, so below 6,000 feet. Above 4,000 feet across south central and around the western Alaska Range, we've got some pockets of icing potential across the eastern Gulf, and then of course wrapping around our front and low pressure system across the southern Bering Sea. Our jet stream has several waves lined up and a very fast, potent jet stream curving into the backside of this weather system that's giving it that extra oomph. Looks like 150 to as high as 190 knots, probably even higher in some cases. We've got a weaker jet flow coming in across southeast, anywhere from 20 to about 65 knots, so faster winds are coming your way. At 9,000 feet, southerlies all the way across the west coast and a good chunk of the Gulf, anywhere from 45 to 55 knots. Stronger winds out ahead of the system, 55 to 60, and you can see a strong wind coming in behind that low pressure system, 55 to 60 knots there. But the warmth with this is substantial as it moves northward across the Arctic coast. South and southeasterly winds over the North Slope at 10 to 30 knots there. So all that warmth is certainly on that very fast conveyor belt working your way. South and easterly winds crossing the Alaska Peninsula, 35 to 40 there. Southerlies over St. Lawrence Island. South and southwesterlies working into the north and eastern Gulf Coast, 30 to 45 over southeast, and generally light winds, but southerly over most of the interior, about 10 to 15. Here's a look at turbulence then. Below 4,000 feet, you are going to have widespread moderate across most of the Alaska Peninsula and the central chain, and there's a probably a good likelihood that you'll have severe across the central Aleutians and eastward. So plan for some bumps and poor flying conditions across the Aleutians tomorrow. At least light to isolated moderate around the Pribilofs, but it doesn't seem to go a whole lot further than that. As you get into southeast, below 3,000 feet, there's an opportunity for occasional moderate there from about Sitka and Port Alexander southward into the Clarence Strait. And probably starting to get some chop around the northern parts of south central, Glen Highway northward, let's say, and through Tenita Pass. Below 4,000 feet, a little bit further westward into the Parks region, you're looking at below 8,000 feet there. That's a look at your aviation report. We'll take a look at the sea ice and your marine weather here in just a few minutes. Stay tuned.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mary O'Connor with the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health here in Anchorage. Thank you to Alaska Public Media for allowing us to bring you hangar flying. We are pleased to have Gary Bennett back on our show. Gary is with Northern Lights Avionics, and we've been chatting about ADS-B and installation in general aviation aircraft. Welcome back to the show, Gary.
Thank you for having me.
So the FAA currently has a $500 rebate program that's offered for the installation of ADS-B equipment. How long does this rebate program last?
That is a good question. So the rebate, basically the design of it, it started in September, and they have 20,000 rebate slots, so to speak. So it will last until those 20,000 rebates have been issued, or until next September, whichever comes first.
Any idea how quickly they've been going?
You know, initially in the first few weeks, they were going very fast, and they slowed down a little bit. I'm not exactly sure where they're at with them right now, but I believe rumors has it that half of the rebates have already been issued.
Wow.
So just in, you know, a quarter of the time, half of the rebates have been issued.
So you work installing this equipment. Do you have any idea how many people in Alaska have equipped?
I don't know how many in Alaska total. I know we've equipped since the rebate program started in September. We've done a little over about 22 installations, and all of the installations that we have done are eligible for the rebate, and many of those have already received their rebate check.
So how do pilots know if the equipment that they want to install qualifies?
The best way to do that would be to go to the FAA ADS-B rebate website and check. One of the first processes in the rebate process is to validate your equipment that you want to do, and they have a very comprehensive list of the different equipment that you can search through by vendor or equipment type that shows you what equipment is capable.
So do pilots normally work with an installer to do this, or do they just pick it out of off the internet?
Usually it can go either way. Most of the ADS-B equipment is installed by a certain installation agency. Some of the equipment can be installed by mechanics or working with an installing agency. So there's a lot of different ways to put it in, but it's a good idea to know ahead of time what's going to be the best equipment for you, because there's a lot of choices and they're not all the same.
Sure. And then when pilots are ready to make that big jump, how does the process go? They make an appointment, they sign up online through the FAA's website.
Correct.
Then they make an appointment for installation.
Yes, and usually it's a good idea to find out before you actually reserve a code, to find out what it is you want to install first, and then kind of get an installation date lined out, because when you get your reservation code, you will need to let them know when you plan on installing it. And that's basically when a clock starts ticking that gives you a certain amount of time, which is 60 days, from that time to actually get the installation done and validate it with the flight.
So it makes sense to work with an installer, and that probably puts a lot of pressure on installers to keep to a schedule.
Yes, yes. So obviously, because of this, many installation facilities are busier than normal.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard Some estimates of some shops are 3 to 5 months back ordered on actually doing installations in some of the ADSB heavy areas down in the lower 48. So we're not too bad here in Alaska. We've been able to keep up with the demand so far.
I have seen advice that pilots should, once they make that commitment, schedule it as soon as possible and get it installed as soon as possible, because the rebates, that time period's going to come quickly, and the prices are not going to come down anymore. And the prices for installation for the shop rates aren't going to come down anymore either. So it makes sense, if you're going to do it now.
Right, yeah, and that's correct. We've, you know, the fact that the equipment is sought after, there's lead times on many of the popular pieces of equipment is what's keeping the price the same on the equipment. What we've seen is some of the slower moving equipment, we're seeing some of the prices go down on, but that's been it. It's been pretty steady. That's
probably a good indication if you're going to get something that's very popular, that works well. It's going to be back ordered.
Yeah, definitely. So. And the whole key right now is, you know, supplement it with the $500 rebate while you can, you know, and that's, you know, that helps out.
Exactly. Exactly. Plus, it's nice to get money from the FAA of all agencies.
Right.
So,
believe it or not.
Thank you so much for being here. We're going to have you back next time, and we're going to talk about the process once installation occurs, because you're not done. They don't send you the check right away.
That's right.
You got another step to go. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching Hangar Flying. We hope you've enjoyed it. Until next time, fly safely.
Here's a look at the latest sea ice conditions across the west, and just a few days ago this entire area here was white, indicating higher than 80% concentration. That doesn't necessarily apply to thickness of the ice, but how solid it was across the surface. Well, a lot of this has changed, and one thing to keep in mind is we're also seeing changes inside of Kotzebue Sound. Now, for a large part of the weekend, it looks like southerly winds will be working over the Seward Peninsula and over the Shishmaref region there, all the way out toward Wales. But one thing to keep in mind is when the winds switch around, and this will probably be sometime Sunday night and into Monday, when they start coming in from the north, there seems to be a polynya right here, and that means all the higher concentration ice that is away from you, if you're out in the polynya, could come moving back to shore very quickly and be pushed very close to shore, or perhaps trapping you and your boat in it. So just be very careful as we get into Sunday night and into Monday. Be mindful of the weather and keep checking the weather, as the conditions may change and the forecast may change. But right now it looks like Sunday night and into Monday could present a small issue for folks leaving the northern coastline there of the Seward Peninsula around Shishmaref and northward all the way out toward Wales, as some of that higher concentration ice could move back in. Here's a look at southeast. Winds are going to come up for you from the south as we get into Saturday. There southerlies on the inside, 25 knots, generally 5-foot seas. Westerlies blowing onshore through Icy Cape and Cape Fairweather, 25 knots with a 13-foot sea, and southwesterlies south of Sitka, 25 to 30 with 12-foot seas there. For Sunday, winds really come up across the outer coast, 35 to 45 knots as you get northward. 18-foot seas expected there, 20 knots outside of Cross Sound. And the northern entrances there in southerlies south of Sitka, 35 to 40 with 20 to 21-foot seas on the inside. 25 up north, 40 in the Clarence Strait, 11-foot seas possible there in the Lynn Canal, 5-foot seas, and 25 knots from the south and east. For south central, south and westerlies will be in charge of the Cook Inlet, Shelikof Strait, and the north and western Gulf. 20 knots inside of Prince William Sound. East of Kodiak Island, 30 knots with a 14-foot sea, 5-foot seas inside of Shelikof Strait, and south of Calgon Island, 5 to 7-foot seas on a 15 to 20-knot wind. Winds reverse course on Sunday. Northerlies coming down Cook Inlet as high as 40 knots south of Calgon Island, 18-foot seas there and into Shelikof Strait, 12-foot seas on a northeast wind. Easterlies up to 40 knots inside of Prince William Sound. Southeasterlies outside of Montague Island at 50 knots and a 17-foot sea will keep the southwesterlies going. East of the Barrens and east of Kodiak Island, 40 knots with a 24-foot sea on Sunday. For the Alaska Peninsula and Bristol Bay, southwesterlies inside of the bay at 9-foot seas with a 20-knot wind. Southeasterlies coming up to 35 and 40 knots on the southern end of the peninsula. 19-foot seas along the Bering Sea coast. As we get into Sunday, southwesterlies come up along the Pacific coast, 40 to 45. 24 to 28 foot seas coming up on Sunday across the North Pacific, so watch for that. Now, the big stuff. For the Aleutians, the central and western chain, high wind watch there for the central region there on land. Behind that, westerlies coming up to 75 knots from Adak to Kiska, 38-foot seas possible there, 40-foot seas south of Adak and Atka on a 70-knot wind from the south-southeasterlies for the central and eastern chain. So hurricane and storm force winds absolutely possible tomorrow as winds continue to come up through the afternoon. Remember, they're going to switch around to the west, and you'll see winds diminish as we get into Sunday afternoon, but Saturday afternoon for the central chain and into early Sunday morning will probably be some of the worst. 50 knots there across the Bering Sea coast as we go through Sunday, still holding on to 60 knots south of Nikolsky to Adak, with seas as high as 47 to 50 feet. So big time danger there. Be careful. South and westerlies across the west coast, 25 to 30 knot winds in all areas, 14-foot seas closer to the west coast in the YK Delta, 22 to 23-foot seas for the Pribilofs and St. Matthew Island. As we look at Sunday, northeasterlies start feeding back into the storm, 20 to 30 knots and 35 knots around the Pribilofs with a 17-foot sea on Sunday. The north slope looking at broad easterly flow for the Beaufort Sea coast and the Chukchi coast, 20 to 25, generally from the east and southeast. For Sunday, winds diminish in all areas, 15 to 20 knots. Generally an easterly wind will be the rule. Recapping tonight's weather, and there's a lot of it, a winter storm watch for the Hyder area, looking for to 2 feet of snow by the end of the weekend there, so watch for that to start tomorrow. Across south and western areas in the Koyukuk Valley, as well as the lower and middle Yukon Valley, could see 2 to 4 inches of snow, some places as high as 8. Some of that snow will also make its way into the Selawik Valley region there, so watch for snow in your area to continue. And a high wind watch for the central Aleutians as the storm system 941 millibar low moves through by the end of the weekend. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you right here tomorrow.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.